Good evening, students. So today in this session we are going to see what is Servlet and how to create dynamic web pages using Servlet. So before going to see how to implement web application using Servlet, just we'll have some basics of what is a Servlet and what are the architecture of Servlet, and then later we'll be discussing on what is servlet programming and what are the packages we need and what are the methods we should be aware of programming this. Okay, so first we'll start with what is a dynamic web page. A dynamic web page, already we need that any web page with which responds to the user input. For example, if I have, so using I think you all know that if we have some form elements like text box, button or something, if I type some value, right, if I click OK, it will be processed and it will be given. So this, when based on the user input, my web page is responding, no? So that is the dynamic web page. This dynamic, how to make a web page dynamic, we need the support of scripting languages. Scripting languages are two types. One is which is done on the client side, that is executed on the client side, is called client side scripting. And if the scripting languages is processed on the server side and only the response is transferred to the client, it is called server side scripting. So the example for client side scripting is the JavaScript, AngularJS, jQuery, etc. And server side scripting, the basic is one is a Servlet, JSP and Java Bean. So these three are basic server side components which is implemented using Java language, and many are there. If you take Visual Studio, VB.NET, ASP.NET, which replaces these are all ASP.NET, where we uses what is that, your Microsoft product. This is the Sun microsystem and this is Microsoft product. And since Java is ruling the world, many of the web applications use these servlet concepts. And as the extension of servlets is there comes your structs, and then comes your Spring, and from Spring it is Spring Boot. Now currently many developers are using the Spring Boot for implementing the dynamic web pages on the server side. Okay, 1 second. So servlet, first we see what is a servlet. A servlet is a program, is a Java program that is used to make a web page more dynamic from the server side, and it is executed by Java based web server. So a servlet is a Java program which is executed in the Java based web server to make more dynamic and responsive web pages. So the main functionality of servlet is to accept the user input, process the request and generate the response and send the response back to the client. So in accepting the request, so we'll be having a client server, and the communication between this client and server, they are accessed through the internet. So it's a common public internet, and where intermediate my message need to hop between multiple devices. So there the communication protocol is your HTTP protocol. So whatever, if I want to send the HTTP request, I use HTTP request, and if this is called HTTP request here, and this is called HTTP response here. So it will accept it, and after in this request itself we have what resource. So the request will have what resource it needs, what resource the client needs from the server side. So the resource may be any one among this. So it is used to find which resource you are accessing, and after that it identifies which resource it is requested and where that resource is available, everything. Then the servlet will process the request, then server will give control to the particular resource to process the request. After processing, it will generate the response, and the response is sent back to the server, and the server will respond back to the client which generated the request. So this full process flow from the client to the servlet and back to the client is done with understandable with this diagram, servlet architecture, where it is already we know that it is a Java program which runs on the Java based web server. Example, Java based web server is our Apache Tomcat. So here the web client will initiate the request, and this request will be whatever the user gives in the form data. So that will be created, packed as a request and sent to the HTTP protocol, and the web server will receive the request. On receiving the request, it needs to identify to whom the request to be forwarded to handle them. So the web server main job is to understand this protocol, communication protocol, and based on the URL it identifies which resource to communicate for handling the request. That is the main job of the web server here. Now the web server gives the control to the container. The container has some basic functionalities like manage the servlet, map the servlet to the request, and handle the servlet or JSP request. So manage the servlet is inside the container. The many servlets can be created or it can be removed, it can be processed. So that management work is done with the main activity of the container. And after that, how many servlets it is available. So it is container, we tell it as a home, residing place for the servlets. So it can have more servlets, and it has a unique file called web.xml which holds the mapping information for a particular request which servlet should be called. So mapping of the servlet and the request is done in the web.xml. So whenever it receives that through the web.xml, the container identifies which servlet to be invoked to initiated to service the request. So this initiating and stopping the servlet, that is called servlet lifecycle. So lifecycle has three methods. One is initiate the servlet. If the servlet is not initiated, we need to initiate the servlet. Then service, do the process. Whatever logic we have done, it should be done, executed. After that, stop the servlet or exit the servlet. So this servlet lifecycle is also handled by the container. And this web.xml is also one functionality. Creating, removing is also one functionality. So this servlet will have the logic, business logic, which needs to be implemented for the particular web application. And added to that, if it needs data to be accessed from the database, it can access, the servlet can directly access the database. So the servlet has some set of codes to access the database also. Okay. So this is the overall servlet architecture. So whenever client send the request, it is received by the web server. Web server will forward the request to the web container. The web container from the web.xml identifies which servlets to be invoked. And suppose this particular servlet is to be identified, this will be executed. It is a normal Java file, .java file, and this will be executed. If it needs the support from the database, it gets connected to the database, and the result, from the result it will generate the response, and this response will be sent back to the server, and this web server will forward the response to the web client. In the web client will be getting the output page. So this is the overall flow architecture of this servlet. So with this basics of servlet, we should know how to write programs in Java for servlet. So in Java, we know that everything is under package, right? So for servlet also we have two packages, java.servlet.x and javax.servlet.x. So this is a basic one and this is the advanced. So most people will be using the advanced one. And this dot star represent whatever class inside the servlet will be accessible through this statement. So we have generic servlet, HTTP request servlet, HTTP response servlet, and we can have servlet exception, many are there, right? And this is the, whatever I have written here is the a basic requirement. If it's for a beginner, these are the basic requirement you should know to write the servlet programming. And these methods have the two methods called doGet and doPost. So doGet is when I use in the form method equal to post, then this request will be forwarded to the doPost method. If in this I use get method, this will be forwarded by the doGet method. This doGet has two, post or doGet has two arguments. One is HTTP request servlet. This is a variable name, it can be anything. And HTTP, second one is a HTTP response servlet, is also a variable. And whatever thing you should be put inside this curly braces, your logics here. So these logics only you should know how to access the form elements and process it and send the result back to the, everything should be packed inside this content. And these do get and do post method must throws this two exception, IO exception and servlet exception. IO exception is suppose I am communicating to two different physical machine outside, right? It may be inside, it may be your client, your server, your container. Since my data is coming out and in from a machine, they are connecting input output. Some problem may happen because my communication is outside the world. So IO exception, input output may occur. Servlet exception, the creation of servlet, servicing of server, invoking of servlet may be a problem. So handle those such type of exception that occurs at the runtime. It should handle, must throw these two exception. And so these things you should know to write the program. And next we are going to see a simple program is a demo where we are going to have a form with two different text box, 10 and 20 I give, and this will be sent as a HTTP request. So the question is how I will get these data. So in the JavaScript we will be getting this text box value by get element by ID. The same thing, the servlet, the method name will be different. So this, for example, I use do get method, HTTP response request, HTTP response here. So this is my servlet, sample servlet code. It is not the actual servlet, okay, sample. So I use a variable n1. Here in the request only, everything will be bundled together. So it is a HTTP request package for package, right? So here my data will be there, and what is the source address, server address, IP address, port number, everything will be added together to generate the full packet. So this on receiving the server side. So my HTTP, this request object, so this name is called request. I'm giving the name for this packet is request. So if I want to identify the respective fields of this packet, I should use request dot whatever parameter. So we call them as a parameters. So I use request dot get parameter. So it is a camel case here. So G is small and P is capital. Okay. So get parameter T1. So this T1 is the name which is in the form element. And these two will be passed in your, whenever this HTTP request will have, right? So in that it will be passed. So from that I can understand T1, what is T1. Similarly, second argument I am getting T2. Similarly, if I am designing a registration form, if I have 10 fields, I can write 10 lines of code to get each and every individual element's values like this. And then I am calculating some sum. Now I got the result. So this sum should be returned back to the client side, and the content should be the result is 30 should be printed on the new screen. So for that I need to transmit the data from this machine container. So this code only I have written. Okay, so whatever content is to be here, I written here. I need to transmit the data to the server side. So for that we will be creating the stream classes. We use many stream classes are there. So better suitable stream classes is print writer. So I create one object print writer pw equal to response dot get writer, because it is to be used for response object. So I should, what is the variable name I gave for this, I am getting the get writer I am setting now. Now what I will do is what type of content I am going to hold. So for that I can write pw dot set content type. I can put text slash HTML. If it is XML, you can put XML like that. What type of content I am going to set for this PW. Now what I can do is PW dot print what I need, the result is. So I put in the paragraph tag and then write the result is, I need that 30 to be printed, right? So I put what is a variable value sum plus slash p. So since this is this one, okay. Since I have given set content to be text slash HTML, so I can use my HTML tags here inside this pw.println. So what will happen is, so this will be sent. So now into this side, and in the screen will be getting the result is 30. So this is how it will be working. So this is a basic program in Servlet to access the form elements, do some process. So this is I am getting the input from the form, and this is processing the data, and this is generating and sending the result back to my client. So these are the simple steps we'll see in the demo session. So for demo, I use the software Eclipse software with the Apache server. It is a default is installed. If you need the latest version in the software itself, there is a provision is there to install. You can install. And one more thing is, if to have this dynamic web page contemporary creation, we should have installed Java Enterprise Edition package also. So these also you can install. So here you can go to the marketplace, help, and marketplace. Under marketplace, Eclipse marketplace, you can check for Java EE and install it, so that in your web page creation you get this option, dynamic web page. Okay, students, let's see in the demo class. Thank you.